Story 1. The first thing I noticed about Mr. Abernathy was his silence. In a building with paper-thin walls where you could hear your neighbor's morning cough, his apartment, 4A, directly next to mine, was a void. He was a small, neat man in his late 50s, with watery gray eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. When we passed in the hall, he'd offer a stiff, brittle nod. I thought he was just a private person. I was grateful for the quiet. The gratitude didn't last. It began subtly. I work from home as a freelance editor, so my schedule is my own. Yet, whenever I'd decide to pop out for groceries or a coffee, his door would click open just as I was locking mine. "Good afternoon," he'd murmur, his gaze skittering away from mine as he shuffled towards the elevator. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence, but after the 7th or 8th time, a cold knot of anxiety started to form in my stomach. It felt less like chance and more like he was listening, waiting for the jingle of my keys. Then came the noises. They always started late, usually after 2 a.m., when the city had finally hushed. It wasn't music or a television. It was a rhythmic dragging sound, a heavy weight being pulled across a wooden floor, followed by a soft, scraping noise. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. It went on for hours some nights. I'd lie in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, imagining he was rearranging furniture. But who moves a wardrobe at 3 in the morning, night after night? I tried to rationalize it. Old building, strange acoustics. Maybe he had a hobby, some kind of woodworking. But the sounds were too deliberate, too unsettling. They sounded like effort, like struggle. The stalking became less deniable a month ago. I'd ordered a specific brand of herbal tea online, something you can't find in stores. The next day I saw Mr. Abernathy by the mailboxes. He gave me that same empty smile. "Jasmine Dragon Phoenix Pearls," he said, his voice a dry whisper. "An excellent choice." Very calming, I froze, my hand hovering over my mailbox key. I hadn't opened the package. It was a plain brown box. There was no way he could have known what was inside unless he'd handled it. Maybe held it up to the light, felt its weight. I mumbled a thank you and fled upstairs, the tea suddenly feeling like poison in my hands. I felt watched, even inside my own apartment. I started covering my laptop camera with tape and drawing the curtains the moment the sun began to set. The feeling of being in a fishbowl was constant. Last week, the scraping and dragging stopped. The silence that replaced it was somehow worse. It was a heavy, expectant quiet. I found myself straining to hear something, anything, from his apartment. There was nothing. For 2 days, I didn't see him at all. I should have felt relieved, but the knot in my stomach had grown into a cold, solid stone. Last night, a new sound broke the silence. A low, wet tapping. It was faint but persistent. I pressed my ear to our shared wall, the cheap plaster cold against my skin. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the spot where his bedroom would be. It sounded like a slow leak, but there was no water damage on my side. I barely slept, the sound a constant, maddening metronome counting down to something I couldn't name. This morning, I couldn't take it anymore. The landlord, a gruff man named Sal, had given me his number for emergencies. This felt like one. When I explained the noises and my concerns about not seeing Mr. Abernathy, Sal sighed. "The guy in 4A? Probably fine. He's a weird one. You know, the girl who had your apartment before you. She complained about him too. Said he was creepy. Left in a real hurry. Broke her lease and everything. Didn't even take all her stuff." My blood ran cold. "What kind of stuff?" "I don't know. Photos, little knickknacks. Weirdest thing was the floorboards. She swore he'd somehow loosened the ones under her bed. I checked, they were fine. She was just spooked." After I hung up, I stood motionless in my living room. Sal's words echoed in my head. Loosened the ones under her bed. My eyes darted to my own bedroom door. The wet tapping from next door had stopped. With a sense of dreamlike horror, I walked into my bedroom and knelt, my hands trembling. I ran my fingers along the edge of the old hardwood planks beneath my bed frame. Most were solid, sealed with decades of varnish. But one, right in the center, shifted. It moved less than a millimeter, but it was enough. My breath hitched. Using my fingernails, I worked at the edge of the plank. It lifted with a soft groan. The space below was dark, smelling of dust and damp soil. And something else. Something metallic and cloying. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed the beam into the hole. Beneath my floor, nestled in the dark space between the joists, was a small, tarnished silver locket. And just beyond it, I saw them. Pale and still. The tips of 5 human fingers. Story 2. The first time I met Mr. Abernathy, he was watering a row of dead geraniums on his balcony. His apartment was directly across the small courtyard from mine, close enough that I could see the papery brown leaves tremble as he doused them. He smiled, a wide, thin-lipped expression that didn't quite reach his pale, watery eyes. "New neighbor," he called out, his voice surprisingly robust for such a frail-looking man. "Welcome to the Willows." I offered a weak wave back. I'd just moved into the second-floor unit, a desperate escape from a bad breakup. The apartment was cheap, the walls were thin, and the whole building smelled faintly of sour milk and dust. But it was mine. The noises started that first week. A scraping sound from his apartment, usually late at night. It was a heavy, dragging noise, like furniture being pulled across a bare floor. Maybe he's redecorating, I told myself, trying to rationalize the grating sound that vibrated through my own floorboards. But the noise was inconsistent, sometimes lasting for an hour, sometimes just a few agonizing scrapes before silence fell again. A few weeks later, the stalking began. It was subtle at first. I'd leave for my morning run, and he'd be on his balcony, same dead geraniums, same unnerving smile. "Morning, Clara," he'd say. I never told him my name. I assumed the landlord had mentioned it. Then it became more specific. I'd come home from the grocery store, and he'd be waiting in the hallway. "Looks like you're making lasagna tonight," he'd comment, his eyes lingering on the box of pasta peeking out of my bag. It was just an observation, but the way he said it, the way he was always there, made my skin crawl. He started mentioning things he had no business knowing. "That blue dress looks lovely on you," he said one afternoon. "Saw you wearing it yesterday." I had worn it, but only inside my own apartment. The fear, a low hum at first, began to sharpen into a piercing shriek. I started double-checking the locks, wedging a chair under my doorknob at night. The scraping noise from his apartment no longer sounded like furniture. It sounded heavier, wetter. It was often followed by a rhythmic thump-thump-thump, like someone beating a rug, but muffled and deep. The landlord, a perpetually tired man named Mr. Klein, waved off my concerns. "Abernathy? He's been here for 30 years, a bit eccentric but harmless." The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I found a small, neatly wrapped box on my doormat. There was no note. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of cotton, was a dead sparrow. Its neck was twisted at an unnatural angle, its small black eyes like polished beads. It wasn't just dead. It had been meticulously placed, presented like a gift. I threw it in the dumpster, my stomach churning. That night, I couldn't sleep. The scraping sound from his apartment started around 2 a.m., louder than ever. I pressed my ear against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. Along with the scraping, I could smell something, a sickly sweet chemical tang, like bleach trying and failing to cover up the coppery scent of old pennies. My curiosity warred with my terror, and terror won. I crept to my front door and peered through the peephole. The distorted lens showed the hallway, empty and flickering under the fluorescent lights. Then, his door opened a crack. I held my breath. Mr. Abernathy emerged, dragging a large, heavy-duty black tarp. It was lumpy, and a dark, viscous liquid was seeping from one corner, leaving a snail trail on the worn carpet. He wasn't struggling. He moved with a practiced ease, his thin frame belying a hidden strength as he dragged the bundle toward the service elevator at the end of the hall. He stopped for a moment, directly in front of my door. He tilted his head, as if listening. I shrank back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. His watery eyes seemed to stare directly through the peephole, right into mine. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. the same empty smile from the balcony. He knew I was watching. He then continued on his way, the scraping of the tarp the only sound in the dead quiet of the building. I didn't wait for morning. I threw clothes and essentials into a suitcase, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it. I didn't call the police. What would I say? That my neighbor was taking out the trash? That he gave me a dead bird? They'd think I was hysterical. I slipped out into the pre-dawn gloom, not daring to look toward his door. As my car peeled out of the parking lot, I risked one last glance up at the building. A single light was on, his. A silhouette stood in the window, perfectly still, watching me go. I've been staying with a friend for a month now, 100 miles away. I lie awake most nights, in a strange bed in a strange city. But even here, with the traffic and the sirens of a new place to distract me, I can sometimes hear it in the silence. A faint, familiar sound, scratching at the edges of my sanity. The sound of something heavy being dragged across a floor.